What if that nagging feeling in the back of your neck was real? What if those hands reaching out from the dark that you believed were there were there? What if the monster in the basement really existed? And what if there was really something under the bed? Would you have the courage to face your fears?
Chapter 1. The Beginning of the End. I never thought I'd be telling a story like this. My name is Jack Thompson, and I'm 24 years old. Just a few months ago, I was a normal graduate student at Cornell University, buried in books and research. My biggest worry being my thesis deadline. Now, I'm fighting for survival in a world gone mad. It all started on a crisp autumn day in Ithaca. The leaves were just beginning to turn, painting the campus in hues of red and gold. I was in the library, surrounded by stacks of neurobiological textbooks when I first heard the screams. At first, I thought it was just some students horsing around, but then came the sound of breaking glass and more screams. These weren't playful shouts, but genuine cries of terror. I stood up, my heart pounding, and peered over the rows of bookshelves. What I saw will haunt me forever. Professor Reeves from the English department was attacking a student, but not in any way I'd ever seen before. His movements were jerky, yet purposeful, his eyes blazing with an inhuman intelligence. The student was on the ground, trying to crawl away, leaving a trail of blood on the polished floor. I should have run. I should have hidden. Instead, I shouted, "Hey, stop!" Professor Reeves turned to me, and in that moment, I knew he wasn't Professor Reeves anymore. His skin was ashen, his eyes clouded yet somehow sharp. He tilted his head, studying me with a predatory gaze that sent chills down my spine. Then he smiled. It wasn't a human smile. It was calculating, cold, hungry. He took a step forward to me, then another. I backed away, my mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. Zombies weren't real. There was stuff of bad horror movies, not something you encountered in an Ivy League library. But as I watched Professor Reeves advance, I saw something that terrified me even more than his appearance. He was thinking, planning. I could almost see the gears turning behind those dead eyes. He glanced at the heavy textbook in my hands, then at a fire extinguisher on the wall. In that split second, I realized he was analyzing the situation, looking for weapons, strategizing. I didn't want to see what he'd do next. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing through the suddenly silent library. Behind me, I heard Professor Reeves let out a low, guttural sound. Not a mindless groan, but almost like a call. As I burst out of the library doors into the fading afternoon light, my phone buzzed. It was an emergency alert from the university. Shelter in place. Multiple reports of violent attacks on campus. This is not a drill. I looked up and saw chaos unfolding across the quad. Students were running in all directions. Campus security was overwhelmed. And there, moving with a terrifying purpose, were more people like Professor Reeves. They weren't shambling or mindless. They were coordinating, cutting off escape routes, herding panicking students like cattle. As I stood there, frozen in shock, one thought kept repeating in my mind. These weren't zombies. They were something much, much worse. They were intelligent, they were organized, and they were evil. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. The world as I knew it was over, and the fight for survival was about to begin. Chapter 2. The Fall of Ithaca. The next few hours were a blur of panic and adrenaline. As night fell over Ithaca, the city descended into chaos. I sprinted across campus, dodging groups of the intelligent undead and trying to process what was happening around me. My dorm was out of the question. I could see from a distance that it had already been overrun. Instead, I found myself running towards Bradfield Hall, where I'd spent countless hours in the atmospheric science labs. It was one of the tallest buildings on campus, offering a good vantage point and, hopefully, safety. As I raced up the stairs, taking them two at a time, I nearly collided with Sarah Chen, a biology grad student I knew from the cafeteria. "Jake!" she gasped, her eyes wide with fear. What the hell is going on? I don't know, I panted, ushering her up the stairs. But those things out there, they're not normal zombies, they're thinking. We barricaded ourselves in the top floor lab, and that's when we got our first real look at the scale of the disaster. The city was burning. Sirens wailing in the distance, punctuated by screams and the occasional burst of gunfire. But what chilled me to the bone was the methodical movement of the zombies through the streets. They were organizing search parties, setting up ambushes at major intersections. I watched in horror as one group used a car to smash the doors of the police station. This wasn't mindless violence. It was a tactical assault. My God, Sarah whispered, her face pale in the eerie glow of the fires. It's like they're waging war. As the night wore on, more survivors found their way to our makeshift fortress. Mike, a burly campus security guard with military experience, arrived with a group of terrified freshmen. Dr. Chen from the neuroscience department stumbled in just before dawn, clutching a laptop to his chest like it was a lifeline. I think I know what's happening, Dr. Chen said, his voice hoarse, but you're not going to like it. He booted up his laptop, showing us a confidential email thread. Apparently, a local pharmaceutical company had been conducting trials on a new cognitive enhancement drug. The goal was to cure Alzheimer's, but something had gone terribly wrong. The drug doesn't just repair neural pathways, Dr. Chen explained. It hyperactivates them, even post-mortem. These creatures retain their intelligence, their memories, without any moral constraints. They're pure id, driven by primal urges, but with human-level problem-solving abilities. The implications were staggering. We weren't just facing zombies. We were up against the worst part of human nature, amplified and unleashed. As the sun rose in a changed world, we gathered around a small radio, listening to emergency broadcasts. The outbreak wasn't confined to Ithaca. Reports were coming in from across upstate New York, each more dire than the last. We need a plan, Mike said, his jaw set with determination. We can't stay here forever. But as I looked out over the smoke-filled skyline of what used to be my home, I realized the truth. Ithaca had fallen, and if these intelligent zombies kept spreading, it was only a matter of time before the rest of the world followed. First, we survive, I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. Then we figure out how to fight back. Little did I know, our small group of survivors would soon be thrust into the heart of humanity's desperate struggle against an enemy that was almost all too familiar and all too clever. As we began to fortify our position, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, the zombies were doing the exact same thing. The battle for upstate New York, and perhaps the world, had only just begun. Chapter 3. Adapting to the new reality. The days that followed our crash course in survival. Our little group in Bradfield Hall quickly realized that our greatest asset against these intelligent zombies was our ability to adapt and learn. Dr. Chen's expertise proved invaluable. He hypothesized that the zombies, despite their retained intelligence, were driven by a need to spread their condition. They're like a virus of the mind, he explained. They want to infect, not just kill. This information changed our entire strategy. We couldn't just hide. We needed to understand our enemy to have any hopes of surviving. Sarah, with her background in biology, worked tirelessly with Dr. Chen to analyze the limited data we had. They theorized that the zombies' intelligence might be linked to their need to feed. The more they consumed, the sharper they became. Mike took charge of our defenses. He taught us basic combat techniques and how to use the meager weapons we'd scavenged. Mostly makeshift clubs and a few fire axes. Aim for the head, he reminded us during our daily drills. It's still the surest way to stop them. As for me, I found myself becoming the group's unofficial leader. My days were spent organizing supply runs, mediating disputes, and trying to boost morale. It was a role I never asked for, but one I grew into out of necessity. About a week into our new life, we had our first major test. A group of zombies, led by what appeared to be a former Cornell professor, attempted to infiltrate our building. They didn't just mindlessly attack. They tried to trick us. The zombies sent one of their own, a young woman who looked relatively unharmed, to our doors pleading for help. It was only Mike's trained eye that noticed her slightly off gait and the faint cloudiness in her eyes. We watched in horrified fascination as the ploy unfolded. When we didn't take the bait, the zombies switched tactics. They started to fire on the lower floors, trying to smoke us out. "They're learning," Sarah whispered, her voice a mix of fear and scientific curiosity. "They're adapting to our defenses." It was a grueling night. We fought the fire and the zombies, using everything we'd learned. In the end, we managed to repel them, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. We lost 2 of our group, and our supplies were dangerously low. The next morning, as we surveyed the damage, I made a difficult decision. "We can't stay here," I announced to the group. "We're too exposed, and they know where we are now." There were murmurs of agreement and fear. Bradfield Hall had been our safe haven, but it was quickly becoming a trap. "Where will we go?" one of the freshmen asked, her voice quavering. I took a deep breath. We head north, into the Adirondacks. There's less population density there, which hopefully means fewer zombies, and the train will give us an advantage. These things might be smart, but they're still dead. They'll have trouble in the wilderness. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all we had. As we packed what little we could carry, I caught a glimpse of myself in a broken mirror. I hardly recognized the person staring back at me, gaunt, grimy, with eyes that had seen too much in too short a time. But there was something else there too, a determination I'd never known I possessed. We were survivors, adapting as quickly as the zombies were, and I was beginning to realize that in the new world, that might be the only thing that could save us. As we prepared to leave the relative safety of Bradfield Hall for the unknown dangers beyond, I couldn't shake the feeling that our journey was just beginning. The zombies had taken Ithaca, but the war for survival was far from over. Little did I know, our trek into the Adirondacks would lead us to discoveries that would change everything we thought we knew about this new, terrifying world. Chapter 4. The Journey North. The morning we left Bradfield Hall was somber. Ithaca, or what was left of it, stretched out before us. A landscape of destruction and eerie silence. We moved quietly through the streets, our small group of survivors huddled close, eyes darting at every shadow and sound. Our plan was simple: head north toward the Adirondacks, scavenge what we could along the way, and avoid confrontation with the intelligent undead at all costs. Easier said than done. The first few days were nerve-wracking. We stuck to back roads and forests, avoiding main highways where the zombies seemed to congregate. It was slow going, but it kept us alive. On our 3rd day out, we had our first major encounter since leaving Ithaca. We were passing through a small town. I think it was Morovia, when we heard it. Music, faint but unmistakable. "It's a trap," Mike said immediately, his military instincts kicking in. But Dr. Chen wasn't so sure. "Could be survivors," he argued, "but we can't just ignore it." I made the call to investigate, but cautiously. Sarah, Mike, and I crept towards the source of the music while the others hung back, ready to run if things went south. What we found chilled me to the bone. In the town square, a group of zombies had set up an elaborate scene. They'd propped up corpses to look like they were having a picnic, complete with a battery-powered radio playing cheerful oldies. It was a macabre tableau designed to lure in unsuspecting victims. But the truly terrifying part was watching the zombies hide and wait. They were patient, coordinated. I saw one of them, a former police officer judging by the tattered uniform, using hand signals to direct the others. We retreated silently, thankful we'd spotted the trap before it was sprung. But the encounter left us shaken. The zombies weren't just intelligent. They were capable of complex, premeditated strategies. As we continued north, we started noticing more signs of the zombies' evolving behavior. They were setting up checkpoints on major roads, creating supply caches, even leaving messages for each other scrawled on walls and road signs. "They're building a society," Sarah observed one evening as we huddled around a small campfire. "A twisted, evil society, but a society nonetheless." It was a sobering thought. We weren't just fighting for survival. We were fighting for the very concept of humanity. Our journey wasn't all grim discoveries, though. We found other survivors. A family of farmers who shared their food. A group of hikers who knew the safest routes to the mountains. Each encounter renewed our hope and reminded us of what we were fighting for. About 2 weeks into our trek, as we were navigating the foothills of the Adirondacks, we stumbled upon something unexpected. A military blockade. For a moment, my heart soared. Had we found salvation? But as we got closer, we realized the soldiers manning the blockade weren't alive. They were zombies. The zombies had taken over a military outpost, and they were using the equipment and weapons with chilling efficiency. We were forced to detour deep into the mountains, away from any semblance of civilization. The going was tough, but it felt safer than facing any weaponized zombies. It was during this detour that we made a discovery that would change everything. High up in the mountains, we found an old research station. It was abandoned, but intact, and inside, we found a treasure trove of scientific equipment and a satellite phone. As Dr. Chen and Sarah pored over the equipment, their eyes lighted up with possibilities. I realized we had found more than just a safe haven. We had found a place where we could start fighting back. That night, as we settled into the relative comfort of the research station, I looked out over the darkened mountains. Somewhere out there, the intelligent zombies were plotting, planning, evolving. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. We had made it this far. We had adapted and survived. And now, with this newfound resource, maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to turn the tide. As I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that our real battle was just beginning. The journey north had been the first step in a war that would determine the fate of humanity itself. Chapter 5. The Mountain Stronghold. The research station quickly became our new home in the center of the resistance. Perched high in the Adirondacks, it offered a natural protection and a stunning view of the valley below. More importantly, it gave us a chance to catch our breath and start thinking beyond mere survival. Dr. Chen and Sarah wasted no time in setting up a makeshift lab. The station's equipment, while outdated, was still functional. They began analyzing blood samples from our group, hoping to understand why we were immune to the zombie plague. Meanwhile, Mike and I focused on fortifying our position. We set up early warning systems using the station's old weather monitoring equipment, rigged to alert us when any movement on the access roads. We also established a series of caches and escape routes in case we needed to abandon the station quickly. The satellite phone proved to be our lifeline to the outside world. We made contact with other survivor groups and military outposts across the country. The news was grim. The intelligent zombies had spread far beyond New York, and traditional containment methods were failing. But we also heard whispers of hope. There were rumors of a resistance forming, scientists working on a cure. Our little mountain stronghold was becoming a node in a network of survivors fighting to reclaim our world. About a month into our stay at the station, we had our first major breakthrough. Sarah burst into the common room one evening, her eyes wide with excitement. "We found something," she announced breathlessly. "The zombie virus. It's not just affecting the brain. It's altering the entire nervous system, creating new neural pathways." Dr. Chen nodded emphatically. "It's like the virus is building a new operating system for the human body. That's why they retain their intelligence and memories, but lose their humanity." It was fascinating, but I couldn't see how it helped us. "Can we use this information somehow?" I asked. Sarah's eyes gleamed. "Maybe, if we can understand how the virus rewires the nervous system, we might be able to disrupt it. We could potentially create a weapon that targets their new neural pathways." It was the first real hope we'd had in months. We threw ourselves into the research, everyone contributing in whatever way they could. Even those of us without scientific backgrounds helped by maintaining the station, gathering supplies, and keeping watch. Our work was interrupted one stormy night by an unexpected arrival. A group of bedraggled survivors stumbled upon our station, led by a former Army Ranger named Alicia. They brought with them new information and resources, but also a warning. "The zombies are organizing on a larger scale," Alicia told us grimly. "They're not just forming packs anymore. They're creating hierarchies, with the most intelligent ones taking leadership roles." This news sent a chill through our group. The ideas of the zombies, forming a coherent society was terrifying, but it also gave us a potential target. If we could disrupt their leadership, we might be able to throw their entire organization into chaos. As we integrated Alicia's group into our own, I found myself spending more time with her, learning about military tactics and leadership. She became a valuable ally and friend, her experience complementing my own growing skills as a leader. Our routine at the station was interrupted a few weeks later when our early warning system detected a large group approaching. We prepared for a fight, but what we saw through our binoculars left us stunned. It was a mixed group of humans and zombies, moving together without hostility. At their head was a figure that made my blood run cold. Professor Reeves, the first intelligent zombie I'd encountered back in Ithaca. As they drew closer, we saw that Professor Reeves was carrying a white flag. The zombies wanted a parlay. I looked around at my companions, seeing my own confusion and fear reflected in their eyes. This was unprecedented. What could the zombies possibly want? And more importantly, could we trust them? As a strange delegation approached our stronghold, I realized we were standing on the precipice of a new chapter in this conflict. Whatever happened next would shape the future of our struggle, and perhaps the future of humanity itself. With a deep breath, I made the decision to hear them out. As I prepared to face Professor Reeves again, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. For better or worse, the real battle for upstate New York and the world was about to begin. Chapter 6. The Parlay. The tension was palpable as we waited for Professor Reeves and his delegation to reach the station's entrance. I stood at the forefront of our group, flanked by Mike and Alicia, both armed and alert. Sarah and Dr. Chen hung back, ready to provide insights if needed. As the mixed group of zombies and humans drew closer, I could see Professor Reeves more clearly. He looked different from when I saw him in the library, more decayed, but somehow more focused. His eyes, though clouded, burned with an unsettling intelligence. "Jake Thompson," he called out, his voice a raspy approximation of his former professional tone. "I see you've done well for yourself." I suppressed a shudder. "What do you want, Professor?" He smiled, a grotesque parody of warmth. "To talk. To negotiate. We're not the mindless monsters you think we are." "You're killing and infecting people," I retorted. "Sounds pretty monstrous to me." Reeves nodded, as if acknowledging a fair point. "We do what we must to survive and propagate. Not so different from you humans, really. But we're evolving, Jake. We're becoming something new. And we think it's time for a truce." I was stunned. A truce? With the zombies? It seemed absurd. Yet, here they were, offering just that. Reeves continued. "We propose a division of territory. We'll stay out of the mountains if you agree to leave the lowlands to us. No more fighting, no more losses on either side." I glanced at my companions. Mike's jaw was set in a hard line, clearly against the idea. Alicia looked thoughtful, while Sarah and Dr. Chen were whispering furiously to each other. "And the humans with you?" I asked, nodding to the terrified-looking people mixed in with the zombies. "Volunteers," Reeves said smoothly. "They've chosen to join us, to be a part of our new society." I didn't believe that for a second, but I kept my face neutral. "We'll need time to discuss your proposal." Reeves nodded. "Of course. We'll camp in the valley below. You have until tomorrow morning to decide." As they retreated, we huddled inside the station, emotions running high. "We can't trust them," Mike insisted. "It's obviously a trap." "But what if it's not?" Sarah countered. "This could be an opportunity to study them, up close, to find a cure." Alicia shook her head. "Too risky. We'd be exposing ourselves to infection." The debate raged on, but I remained silent, turning the situation over in my mind. Finally, I spoke up. "We're going to accept their offer," I said, raising my hands to quiet the immediate protests. "But not because we trust them. We'll use this opportunity to gather intelligence, to understand their organization better, and we'll prepare for the fight that's sure to come." It was a dangerous game, but it was our best chance to get an advantage. We spent the night preparing, setting up hidden cameras and sensors to monitor the zombie camp. The next morning, I met Reeves again. "We accept your proposal," I told him, watching his face carefully. "But we have conditions." As I laid out our terms, restricted zones, regular check-ins, exchanges of information, I could see the calculated look in Reeves' eyes. He was playing the same game we were, looking for weaknesses, seeking advantages. We shook hands to seal the deal, his cold, clammy grip a reminder of the unnaturalness of our allies. As Reeves and his group departed, Alicia came to stand beside me. "You know this won't last," she said quietly. I nodded. "No, it won't. But it buys us time, and right now, that's the most valuable thing we have." Back inside, we gathered around our makeshift command center. "All right," I said, looking at each of my companions in turn. "Now the real work begins. We need to use this time wisely. Sarah, Dr. Chen, double-check into research. Mike, Alicia, start planning for every possible scenario when this truce inevitably breaks." As everyone dispersed to their tasks, I couldn't shake the feeling of foreboding. We were entering a new phase of this conflict, one that would require all of our intelligence, creativity, and courage. The battle for upstate New York had become a chess match, and we were playing against an enemy that was always one step ahead. But as I looked at the determined faces of my companions, I felt a surge of hope. We had come this far. We had survived, adapted, and grown stronger. Whatever the intelligent zombies were planning, we would be ready. The fate of humanity depended on it. Chapter 7. The Calm Before the Storm. The weeks following our truce with the zombies were surreal. On the surface, a tense peace held, but underneath, both sides were preparing for the inevitable conflict to come. We used our time wisely. Sarah and Dr. Chen made significant progress in their research, working tirelessly to understand the zombie virus and its effects on the nervous system. They were onto something big, a potential weakness in the zombies' neural network that could be exploited. Meanwhile, Mike and Alicia transformed our mountain stronghold into a fortress. They trained everyone in combat techniques, set up intricate defense systems, and strategized for every possible scenario. I split my time between helping with the preparations and monitoring our uneasy truce with the zombies. Our surveillance of the zombie camp in the valley yielded disturbing insights. We observed complex social structures forming, with clear hierarchies and specialized roles. Some zombies seemed to be purely fighters, while others appeared to be problem solvers or builders. It was like watching a twisted mirror of human society evolve and fast forward. About a month into the truce, we had our first major breakthrough. Sarah burst into our command center, her eyes wild with excitement. "We've done it," she announced. "We found a way to disrupt their neural pathways. It's not a cure, but it could essentially reset them, temporarily reverting them to a mindless state." It was the advantage we've been hoping for. We immediately began working on ways to weaponize this discovery, developing a device that could emit the disruptive frequency over a large area. But our progress didn't go unnoticed. We began to see increased zombie activity around the borders of our territory. They were probing our defenses, testing our resolve. Professor Reeve requested more frequent meetings, each time probing for information about our research. Then, about 6 weeks into the truce, everything changed. One of our scavenging parties failed to return. We found them 2 days later, or what was left of them. They had been ambushed well within our territory, a clear violation of our truce. When I confronted Reeves about it, his response chilled me to the bone. "Evolution is a harsh mistress, Jake," he said, his dead eyes gleaming with malice. "The strong survive, the weak perish. It's time for the next stage of our coexistence." I knew then that the brief peace was over. The zombies had used the truth to gather intelligence, just as we had. Now, they were ready to make their move. We retreated to our mountain stronghold and prepared for war. Our early warning systems were going haywire, detecting massive zombie movements throughout the region. They were massing for an attack, and we were right in the crosshairs. The night before the expected assault, I gathered everyone in the main hall of our base, Faces that had become dear to me over the past months looked back, a mix of fear and determination in their eyes. Tomorrow, we face our greatest challenge, I began. My voice steady despite the turmoil in my gut. The zombies are coming, and they're coming in force. But we have something they don't. Our humanity. Our ability to hope, to love, to fight for something greater than ourselves. I paused, looking at each person in turn. We've prepared for this. We have weapons they can't anticipate. We have the high ground. And most importantly, we have each other. Tomorrow, we don't just fight for our lives. We fight for the future of humanity. A chorus of determined voices answered me. We spent the rest of the night making final preparations, checking weapons, and saying what might be final goodbyes. As dawn broke, I stood on the roof of our base, watching the mist rise from the valleys below. Somewhere out there, an army of intelligent undead was approaching. The fate of upstate New York, perhaps the world, would be decided in the coming battle. I thought of how far we'd come since the day in the Cornell Library when my world turned upside down. We had faced unimaginable horrors, lost friends, and been pushed to our limits. We had also discovered strength we never knew we had, forged unbreakable bonds, and kindled a flame of hope in the darkness. As the first zombies appeared on the horizon, a vast horde shambled toward us with terrible purpose. I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was it. The moment everything had been leading to. I turned to Mike and Alicia, who stood ready beside me. Let's show them what humanity can do, I said, my voice firm with resolve. The battle for our future was about to begin. Chapter 8. The Battle for Humanity. The attack came with the rising sun. The zombie horde surged up the mountain slopes, their numbers far greater than we had anticipated. From our vantage point, it looked like a tide of death washing over the landscape. But we were ready. As the first wave approached our outer defenses, Mike gave the signal. Hidden speakers throughout the surrounding forest blasted the neural disruption frequency we had developed. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Hundreds of zombies stumbled, their coordinated movements dissolving into confused shambling. It's working! Sarah shouted over the din, her face a mixture of elation and disbelief. But our victory was short-lived. From the back of the horde, a second wave emerged, zombies wearing crude helmets that seemed to shield them from the disruptive frequency. Leading them was Professor Reeves, his face contorted in a grotesque sneer. They've adapted, Dr. Chen said, his voice grim, faster than we expected. There was no time to dwell on the setback. The battle was upon us in full force. Our defenses held initially, automated turrets and strategically placed explosives thinning the zombie ranks, but they kept coming, using tactics that showed a chilling level of strategic thinking. I found myself in the thick of the fighting, wielding a modified rifle that fired darts loaded with a concentrated version of our neural disruptor. Every shot dropped a zombie, but for each one that fell, two more took its place. Hours blurred together in a haze of desperate combat. We lost people, good people. Each death was a knife to my heart, a reminder of the cost of this war. But we held our ground, our determination fueled by the knowledge we were humanity's last hope. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows of the battlefield, I spotted Professor Reeves directing his forces from a ridge. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. Cover me, I shouted to Alicia, who nodded grimly and laid down suppressing fire. I fought my way through the chaos, single-mindedly focused on reaching Reeves. He saw me coming, his dead eyes lighting up with a twisted glee. Ah, Jake, he called out as I approached. Come to join us at last? This ends now, Reeves, I growled, raising my weapon. What followed was both a battle of body and mind. Reeves was inhumanly strong, but I had rage and desperation on my side. We grappled at the edge of the ridge, each trying to gain the upper hand. Why fight it, Jake? Reeves hissed as he struggled. We are the next step in evolution. Join us and be part of something greater. His words stirred something in me. Not temptation, but a renewed sense of what we were fighting for. Humanity is already part of something greater, I shot back. We have hope, love, compassion. Things you've lost. With a surge of strength, I managed to jam a neural disruptor dart into Reeve's neck. He howled, more in anger than pain, and stumbled backwards. For a moment, he teetered on the edge of the ridge. Our eyes met, and I saw a flicker of something. Fear, maybe, or a ghost of his former humanity. Then he was gone, tumbling down the steep slope. The effect of the zombie forces was immediate. Without Reeve's direction, their coordinated assaults fell apart. They began to fight among themselves, confused and directionless. Taking advantage of the chaos, we launched our final counterattack. The neural disruptor frequency, combined with our conventional weapons, turned the tide. By midnight, it was over. The remaining zombies had either been neutralized or had fled into the wilderness. As dawn broke on the day after the battle, I stood with my surviving companions, surveying the carnage. We had won, but at a terrible cost. Our mountain stronghold was in ruins, and many of our friends were gone. But as I looked at the faces of the survivors, tired, grieving, but unbowed, I felt a glimmer of hope. We had faced the worst that this new world could throw at us, and we had prevailed. "What now?" Sarah asked, her voice hoarse from shouting orders during the battle. I took a deep breath, looking out over the scarred landscapes of what had once been a peaceful mountain range. "Now," I said, "we rebuild. We take what we've learned. We honor those we've lost, and we start reclaiming our world." As the others nodded in agreement, I knew that our journey was far from over. The intelligent zombies were still out there, and there was surely other challenges ahead. But we had proven that humanity's spirit could not be broken. The battle for upstate New York was won. The war for our future was just beginning. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I truly believed we could win. Chapter 9. The Aftermath and New Beginnings. The days following our victory were a blur of exhaustion, grief, and cautious hope. As we buried our fallen comrades and tended the wounded, the full weight of what we had accomplished and what we had lost began to sink in. Our mountain stronghold, once a beacon of hope and resistance, now lay in ruins. The surrounding forest was scarred by battle, the ground littered with the remains of both zombies and humans. The cost had been high, but we had survived. As we began the arduous task of cleaning up and rebuilding, we also focused on consolidating our knowledge. Dr. Chen and Sarah worked tirelessly to document everything we had learned about the zombies and the virus that created them. Their research, combined with our battle experiences, would be invaluable to the fights to come. About a week after the battle, as we were salvaging what we could from our damaged lab, Sarah made an unexpected discovery. "Jake," she called out, her voice trembling with excitement, "you need to see this." I rushed over to see her peering into a microscope. "What is it?" She looked up at me, her eyes shining. I think I might have stumbled onto a cure." The news spread through our camp like wildfire, igniting a spark of hope that could be dimmed by the recent battle. If Sarah was right, we might have a way not just to fight the zombies, but to save them, to bring them back to the humans they once were. But our celebration was short-lived. That evening, our long-range radio crackled to life with an urgent message from a military outpost in Albany. The zombies we had fought were just the vanguard of a much larger force. A massive horde was moving across the state, more organized and deadlier than anything we had faced before. As I shared this news with the others, I could see the weariness in their eyes. We had just survived one battle. Did we have the strength for another? But then Alicia spoke up, her voice firm. "We're not alone in this fight anymore. We have knowledge. We have a potential cure. And we have proof that these things can be beaten. It's time we took the fight to them." Her words galvanized us. Over the next few days, we formulated a plan. We would abandon our mountain stronghold and make our way to Albany, sharing our knowledge and gathering allies along the way. With the military's resources and our expertise, we might have a real chance of turning the tide. The journey would be perilous. We knew the zombies controlled much of the lowlands, and winter was approaching, promising harsh travel conditions. But we also knew that staying put was not an option. The future of humanity was at stake. As we prepared for our departure, I found myself standing at the makeshift memorial we had created for our fallen friends. My hands traced the names etched into the rough wooden plaque, each one a reminder of the cost of our struggle and the importance of our mission. "We won't let your sacrifice be in vain," I whispered to the silent names. On the morning of our departure, I gathered our group, now a hardened band of survivors and warriors. Looking at their faces, I saw determination, fear, hope, and resolve. "What lies ahead won't be easy," I began, my voice carrying across the crisp mountain air. "We've lost much, and will likely lose much more before this is over. But we carry with us the key to humanity's survival. Each of you have proven your strength, your courage, and your humanity in the face of unimaginable horror. Together, we're going to take back this world." A chorus of affirmations met my words. As we shouldered our packs and weapons, taking one last look at the place we had called home and fortress, I felt a mixture of sadness and anticipation. We were leaving behind the safety of our mountain refuge, venturing into a world overrun by intelligent, evolving zombies. The journey to Albany would test us in ways that we couldn't imagine. We were no longer the scared, desperate survivors who had first fled these mountains. We were stronger now, united in purpose and armed with knowledge that could change the course of this war. As we began our descent into the valley, the rising sun at our backs, I allowed myself a moment of optimism. The battle for upstate New York had been won, but the war for humanity's future was beginning, and this time, we were taking the fight to them. The road ahead was long and fraught with danger, but for the first time since this nightmare began, the future held more than just survival. It held hope. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story. I know it was a long one. If you're still here, I appreciate you listening to the whole thing, and I hope you enjoyed it. Come back next time for some more scary stories and zombie stories. And as always, remember to face your fears.